Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Regime Season 1, Episode 4. A year within the palace of a modern European authoritarian regime as it unravels. The Regime's The Hero's Banquet, Episode 3, depicts the culmination of tensions within the palace due to a daring choice made by Kate Winslet's Chancellor. Warning: significant spoilers are ahead. In the most recent episode of The Regime, Elena regains control while her relationship with Zubac severely deteriorates. The Regime, a sharp political satire reminiscent of the succession, stars Kate Winslet as the fictitious country's chancellor, Elena Vernum. Elena's mixture of egotism and worry about her image causes the chancellor to confide in one of her soldiers, Herbert Zubac. Their strange friendship only causes additional problems for the regime's unnamed country. Soon, Elena's government is planning to remove the unstable Zubac from the palace. The Chancellor's ministers started this in the Regime Episode 2, hoping that Elena would grow weary of him if he accelerated his rise to power. They erroneously assert that Zubac is a descendant of the foundling, the initial settler of the nation. Months later, as the third episode begins, there are already indications that the Chancellor is growing weary of the soldiers' extreme policies. By the conclusion of the third episode of the Regime, a lot had changed. Why Elena gives the order to annex the Faban Corridor. The Chancellor takes an action that has been years in the making. Chancellor Kate Winslet questions Emil Bardos in the second episode of The Regime. Elena's desire for her nation to reunite with the Faban Corridor is made abundantly evident in the first two episodes. When discussing the nation's rejection of a mining contract with us Secretary of State Judith Holt-Martha Plimpton in the second episode, the Chancellor brings up this particular point of contention. The Chancellor finds herself undercut by Herbert in the first part of Episode 3, as he becomes increasingly insistent about advancing his goal. When the Chancellor finally makes the decision to strike back, she declares that the country will unite with the 800-square-mile ethnic mountain region known as the Faban Corridor. This abrupt development naturally worries her cabinet, but she brushes it off, saying the reunification will be cleaner. While NATO swiftly denounces the annexation of the Faban Corridor, Elena maintains that it is legal. The protagonist of the regime also downplays worries about sanctions or the collapse of the stock market and overlooks complaints of breaches of human rights. One outcome of the invasion that she is really thrilled about is that it has brought her back into the global news spotlight. Herbert personally opposes the annexation plan for the Faban Corridor because he intended to implement land reform that returned the land to the people. He understands that Elena is putting distance between them and that her past infatuation with him is over. Zubac and the Chancellor split up. Elena and Herbert's collaboration has fully terminated. In the regime, Kate Winslet portrays Elena, and Matthias Schoenaerts portrays Corporal Zubac. The main event of the regime Episode 3, which unites the nation's elite in celebration of the acquisition of the Faban Corridor, is an opulent victory party. At Elena's request, Herbert is made to don a flashy uniform, and he watches in distaste as the celebration gets too extravagant. During his stand-up performance, the Irish comedian hosting the party makes fun of him, which makes Zubac very unhappy. The audience laughs at his obviously uncomfortable demeanor. Following the celebration, Zubac and the Chancellor retreat to a room where they get into a heated confrontation, with Herbert even seizing Elena by the neck. Though he makes it plain that nothing will ever happen, the Chancellor is fully aware of his attraction to her as well. After their highly personal disagreement in the regime's second episode, Zubac storms off, revealing he has long-standing anger issues. By the end of this adventure, Elena has cut Herbert out of her inner circle, and the two erstwhile allies are no longer on the same page. The key question is how he will react to this in the remaining episodes of the regime. The founding plan of the cabinet was effective. In the last scene of the regime Episode 2, Matthias Schoenaerts' portrayal of Herbert as the country's creator, the minister's complex plan succeeded. In the second episode, the cabinet and Elena's husband, Nicky Guillaume Gallion, plan to fire Zubac. Nicky learns that smearing the soldier with mud won't work after all. Elena didn't mind that Herbert had shot and killed a group of demonstrators, so they'll have to go outside the box. That's where the concept of the foundling originated. It said that if the Chancellor believed Zubac was descended from the founder, she would have total faith in him, but would eventually tire of him. The foundling twist in Regime Episode 2 will have far-reaching effects in the future, But is there any truth to the three brothers myth? Their plot doesn't seem to be working when episode 3 begins, with Elena even agreeing to eat dirt at Zubac's request. The Chancellor begins to push back as his land reform plan puts her own fortune at risk. The foundling scheme sort of worked, although it also set up the invasion of the Faban Corridor and a number of other issues for the collapsing country. Elena regains command over her routine. Regime Episode 3 sees the culmination of the Chancellor's increasing dependence on her new counselor. Zubac starts showing up to meetings without Elena and revealing plans that he had not even told her about. Zubac requests that they dress like farmers on the day of her late father's birthday celebration, and he only extends invitations to those who live nearby. The Faban Corridor Annexation is, in a way, Elena's decision to reclaim authority after growing weary of Herbert's dictates. In addition, she fires him after a few months and appoints him Faban Freedom Captain in charge of leading the invasion. The Chancellor is experiencing her father's death in visions. There was a sense of tension between them in the first episode when Elena went to her father's mausoleum. This is verified in the third episode of The Regime, where the Chancellor had a horrific nightmare in which her father, Joseph, betrayed her. He refers to her as vapid, feckless, and bereft of vision in the dream. Elena then wakes up, and Joseph challenges her to be brave and regain control. Naturally, this is what ignited the invasion of the Faban Corridor.